everyone. Welcome back to Champion Your Life with me, Leighanne Champion. It's great to be with you always, and I'm kind of excited about what we're going to talk about today. Failure, woohoo! But more specifically, we're going to talk about how to fail and how actually it's a really good thing. My husband, Tom, likes to call it successful failure, and there's just a lot in that statement alone, right? But there's so much advice out there in the world about how to succeed. But I think there really needs to be a whole lot more discussion around failing and how this is just part of our path to success and that it's okay to fail. It's exactly what our tagline is for the show. Congratulations, you failed, and now you're on your way. I would say that so many people don't go for their dreams because they're afraid to fail, or they think they have failed and they can't quite pick themselves up. And so many clients will say to me, you know, Leighanne, I have a real fear of failure, of being judged and disappointed. And as a coach, I like to ask a lot of questions that really inspire people to just take a peek into their minds. And I'll ask them, well, what do you really mean by that? What exactly is failure in your eyes? And why are you afraid of it? It's interesting. Most of them will kind of think about it for a little while and then they'll go, you know what, let me get back to you because I've just never really thought about it in the way that you're asking me. You see, in coaching, we always like to try to get to the root cause of all the issues. And we don't necessarily try to solve the problem immediately. We look to sort of uncover the cause of the issue so that the client can see it for themselves. And that experience is really powerful. You know what? I have to admit, I love quotes. I probably tortured my friend, Jacob, who is my producer. And I have them all written out in my notes section on my computer, all my favorite wise quotes and scriptures. And I found one on failure by Marcus Aurelius that really blew my mind. Now, keep in mind, Marcus wrote this in the age of the Stoics 2 centuries ago. He wrote, when failure comes, ask what went wrong, what can be improved. Failure is a source of breakthroughs. Now, how's that for some timeless age-old wisdom? I love this definition of failure. I mean, it sounds pretty harmless to me. I'll say it for you one more time because I think it's so good. When failure comes, ask what went wrong. What can be improved? Failure is a source of breakthroughs. Now, if failure means we just didn't do what we set out to do and it didn't turn out as we expected, or someone else just didn't come through on our expectation, it suddenly just all seems so benign, so unimportant, doesn't it? Just part of life. It becomes, okay, well, that just happened. It is what it is. But the word failure in our culture is so loaded, right? But suddenly you reflect on some age-old wisdom and we realize, well, this has been going on forever, right? There's nothing new under the sun. We realize then that it all becomes about our expectations. Something just didn't turn out the way we had expected. But it's really interesting to think about what most human beings do. We just stop expecting anything so that we never have to fail. It's the idea that if we keep our expectations really low, we keep ourselves hiding, then we don't have to deal with the dreaded failure. But you know what? The problem with this is that we just keep recycling, right? The same old. And for some people, that's more than okay, because perhaps your life is beautiful just as it is. And I want to say, how great is that? But for so many of us, we have a yearning, right, to do something more. And we try our level best to ignore that yearning and bury it away. And that's who I am talking to today. You all know that I'm a big proponent for getting outside of our comfort zone. I think you've heard me say a few times now. Discomfort is the currency of our dreams. Yep. Discomfort is a currency of our dreams. And of course, no one really loves this idea of discomfort. But if we hide and we don't embrace what it is that we're supposed to learn in our lifetime, you know what I think that does? I think it crushes our spirit. So many clients that I talk to tell me that they don't feel alive anymore, and they're not putting themselves out there because they're afraid. They are afraid of failing. So if you like it or not, it's really the fear of failure is big out there. But today I'm excited because we're going to look at it from a very different angle. So the next question, if we were hanging out together, and I ask you is why? Why are you avoiding failing? And what do you think you're making failure mean? And when we break it down, most people are afraid of the emotions that failure may bring, and they want to avoid them at any cost. Why? Because they equate failing with shame or rejection or disappointment or humiliation. I mean, these are all the negative emotions that we humans, oh my gosh, we try so desperately to avoid, don't we? So the bottom line here is the real reason we are avoiding failing or missing the mark or not meeting our own expectations is because we are desperate not to feel what we perceive that we're going to feel when that happens. And here's what's really fascinating about that. When we don't meet our own expectations, the only thing that we're going to end up with is based on what we decide to think. Yep, here we are, back to the importance of our thought life. Stay with me and let me break this down. We set out to do something, and as a human, we have an expectation of a result. And if we miss that expectation, we get to decide what we're going to make that mean. We get to decide what we're going to think about that. So if you make the decision to think of it in a way that really hurts your feelings or blows up your confidence in a way that's like dejecting or humiliating or disappointing, then guess what? Guess what you're left with? Just a bunch of negative emotions. And isn't it ironic when you realize that the whole reason you've been avoiding failing is because you wanted to avoid something that you actually have complete control over, which is your reaction to failing. Crazy, right? And I really hope that you're all following this because it's really, really important. Listen a couple times if you need to. You are avoiding something that you are in charge of and deciding to act as though it's happening to you. Most people, when I coach them around failure, will say something like, oh, Leighanne, I keep failing over and over and over, and then I have to experience it over and over. It's the worst. But first point I want to make is when we don't meet our original expectations, we can decide not to make that mean it's the end of the world. You know, failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, and this time more intelligently. In fact, we can decide to make our failure mean something quite positive, quite useful. And I want to give you an example here because this may all sound very interesting in theory, but you might not be buying into it yet. And I get that. Perhaps you're new to this work. But I'd like you to consider the scenario. You're a real estate agent, okay? You're in negotiation with a new client, and your boss has asked you to do a Zoom with your client, and he wants to join in on the call. So you begin the process of developing your presentation. You're really pumped about it. You know, you've done your homework and you have your pitch down. So you roll with it, you know, you get on the Zoom, and at the end of the presentation, you realize, oh no, I forgot to include origination fees. Oh my gosh, how could I have done that? It's such a key component. Oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm a complete moron. What do I do? How do I fix this? Now, imagine if you said to yourself, well, since I left that money piece out, one of the most important pieces, I'm clearly not good at this. And then you could go a step further in your mind and tell yourself, oh, geez, you know what? I shouldn't even have presented this at this time. I mean, clearly I'm not well versed in this. I cannot believe I did this to myself. And then if you took it one step further down the rabbit hole, you might even say, I'm never going to try this again because this just feels so awful. Clearly, I'm terrible at this. Well, the reason it would feel so awful to you is because you're making it mean that there is something wrong with you, that somehow it's not your strength. But let's stop and look at this for a moment. If you do this to yourself, it's because of your own negative storytelling, isn't it? And guess what? You're the cause of it. Wild, right? But let's just turn it around for a minute and look at it from another angle. You could set out to do your presentation on Zoom, and at the end of it, realize that you left out a very key component. But you could say to yourself, oh, wow, I did it. Got through it. I just overcame one of my biggest fears, which is presenting on Zoom to my boss. Oh boy, I left out a rather key component, but you know what? I'm just going to send an email to all the people on the call and confidently admit my mistake. Here's a truth moment for you all. You know what? People love it when you can admit your mistakes. You know, I know there are going to be a few cantankerous bosses out there in the world, but most, in fact, will admire you for it. You've been real and honest. And I have found this in my own life. When I am authentic, admitting my mistakes or my fear, you know what? People appreciate it. They respect you more, and they may even want to lend you a hand. And in many instances, it creates a deeper connection. You know, you could say to yourself, well, that was a learning experience. I'll never do that one again. So it always goes back to our wise sage, Marcus Aurelius, doesn't it? When failure comes, ask what went wrong. What can be improved? Failure is a source of breakthroughs. Can you see when you think about it that way, it doesn't make you want to avoid failing? Perhaps we just should turn the word failing into learning. And by doing so, it just makes us want to get back on the horse again, right? Just to learn, grow, improve, and try it again. A totally different feeling than failure, right? You know, there are some great quotes out there, and they say that success is one of those things that's acquired by failure and by being willing to fail. And they also say if you want success, you need to double your rate of failure. Another quote that I found really interesting, success leaves clues. And I love that one too. And when I remember when I first heard the quote, I was quite enamored of it, but I didn't really get it. But I do now. Success leaves clues. What does it mean? We can literally study the people who have been successful in life at the exact thing that we're interested in, or something similar to what we're interested in, and then we emulate and mirror what they did. But I'm pretty sure, though, those people who became successful got very comfortable with failure, you know, and I'm really very grateful to them for showing us the way. So how do we become comfortable with failure? Practice. We have to practice showing up, making a ton of mistakes, not getting all dramatic about them. And from those mistakes, we learn what does and doesn't work. I see a couple of comments coming in the chat box. I love it when you guys write in. Keep them coming. We're going to go for a quick break. You've been listening to Champion Your Life, and we're talking about learning how to fail. Congratulations, you failed, and now you're on your way. We'll be right back. We're back, and I got a great comment in the chat box, and I'm just going to get right to it. I struggle with failure because I always want my ideas to be absolutely perfect. And then I begin to doubt myself, and I never get anything done. All right. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you for being honest. Love you. Thank you for writing in. This comment's going to help so many people who are listening today. You know, that word perfect sends shivers up my spine. I'm so glad you wrote about this. So many people, acquaintances, friends, clients have shared with me that they're perfectionists. And I think we all have a little bit of that in us. And they'll say, Leighanne, I just really want to do this well. You know, just like what you're saying, I'm willing to do it if it, you know, if it doesn't come out, I'm just not willing to do it if it doesn't come out perfectly. And you know what? That's a lot of pressure. I think perfectionism kills a lot of dreams. I've even heard it say that perfectionism is the excuse for people who are just feeling scared. Being scared gives them a real reason not to take action, doesn't it? To not put themselves in harm's way. But one of my mentors always made this point to me. She said, just do it. Whatever it is, just give it your best B+ work and get on with it. Oh my gosh, that really resonated with me so much. It just kind of gave me permission, right, to move forward. I say it to myself to this day, every day. Best B+ work, Leighanne. And that way I just don't get so stuck in my head with this idea of perfectionism. And then if I did, I just wouldn't move forward, right? Now, if you can set yourself up ahead of time, think through these concepts, then you will be so much more willing to give new things a try. That's why I always say to you, listen to this podcast several times until it sinks in, take notes, and remember, we have to learn to get out of our comfort zone, right? And when we put ourselves in a situation where we're way out of our comfort zone to try something new that you've never done before, yes, it's risky. And yes, it's scary. But I have to ask you all, what are you risking? Failure? Yes, you could fail. But if you know ahead of time you could fail, what are you going to do? Hide? I mean, really, the path of least resistance is a terrible, terrible teacher, isn't it? Hiding. What do we learn from that? Instead, you're going to take care of yourself. You're going to have your own back. And then you're going to get back in the saddle again and try again another path to success. So what if you were to say to yourself, hey, self, I'm going to go out there and do this. Whatever it is you're dreaming of, joining a new class, trying a whole nother career, or writing that book that you know you've always had in you. For sure, there is more than a chance that along the way I'm going to fall down and not meet my expectations. I'm going to fail, and probably many times over. But when I fail, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have my own back. Yes, my own back. I'm going to respect and honor myself and use that as an opportunity to grow and love myself for my efforts. But I'm certainly not going to put myself down or belittle myself in any way. When we are willing to fail, we are probably going to double our rate of failure and maybe even triple it. But guess what? You will also have a much higher chance of ultimately achieving your dreams and the success you desire. Now, let's just talk for a quick second about the benefits of failing and falling down. I love this simple example of a little toddler learning how to walk. And in this process of a little one learning to walk, there are some real epic fails, aren't there? Think about it. When they start out, they're falling and planting every third step or so. And the main reason is that we just don't have the strength yet, right? But when they fall, those little ones, what do? They like to push themselves back up. And usually with mom and dad cheering them on along the way. But they don't give up, do they? They just keep pushing themselves back up to try again. And ultimately, they gain the strength to be able to walk. I just think this is just such a classic, simple, precious example. And it's so fascinating to me that as toddlers, we knew this instinctively. We knew instinctively to keep trying, to keep going. I mean, God created us this way. Where along the way did we lose that? Where the heck did that go? It's instinctive in us. It was when we were young. In one of my coaching training sessions, we were discussing where our confidence comes from. And we came to a united conclusion that it truly comes from your willingness to fail in front of people. And what was really interesting is that we uncovered how most people define their confidence from their past experiences. And they'll say, well, I'll be confident at whatever it is once I've done it several times. And then our conversation then became, well, how do you find that same sense of confidence with something that you've never done before? You have to find confidence going into your future. You have to believe in your future self. Yeah, and that's another podcast in the future. But you might be saying right now, Leighanne, how do I find confidence in my future if I'm doing something that I've never, ever done before? Well, your confidence has to come from your willingness to fail and knowing that you're not going to give up. And in the knowing that you can fail and get better and better and better every time. That's the key. I saw my own father start several businesses in our basement. And I used to laugh because there was always just this wonderful hive of activity down there, including our dog. But when I reflect, certainly not all of his companies worked, but a few did. And one or two of them spectacularly so. A few people around a card table. Who knew? It's so fun for me actually to relate this story today as I now realize what a just profound impact my dad made on me. And he had a plaque on the wall saying something like this. One person said it couldn't be done. Another person said it could. And it was. He believed, didn't he? Ted Lasso style, I think. Learning how to fail is something you intentionally need to include in your life. We must learn these skills. It has to be part of our repertoire. It's certainly not something to avoid and not talk about. That's for sure. In fact, it's actually something to pursue and make a decision to pursue and work at getting better and better at it. Remember, failure is a source of breakthroughs. There's another quote that Edison was famous for, and he said, no, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I learned 1,000 things that didn't work. What a brilliant way to look at our own failures. It's just learning opportunities. When we think about the word failure, we must learn to think about it in a way that's more positive, right? We need to think about moving towards it instead of something that we're like, I'm going to run from this. I have loved developing this concept of learning how to fail. It's just a skill that we all can develop over time. And if we embrace the idea of falling down, we will actually learn how to fall down really well. Then we'll have the confidence we need as we go into our future selves. Now, I really hope this podcast has resonated for you. I hope that this has completely changed your mind on the way that you think about failure. And perhaps when you hear failure from now on, your brain will leap to this idea of learning instead. I'd like you to all to think of me as your biggest failure cheerleader. All of these concepts really got me excited too. As I wrote it, I was getting all fired up. I hope it gets you thinking about your future self and all the promise it has. And I don't want you avoiding or hiding anymore. Perhaps today or tomorrow, you will have a successful failure. You've been listening to Champion Your Life with me, Leighanne Champion. I want you to remember the tagline from our show today. Congratulations, you failed. And now you are on your way. If you need any help with this, reach out to me through my website, LeighanneChampionCoaching.com. I love nothing more than to help people live their best lives. Godspeed.
Thank you for listening to Champion Your Life with me, Leighanne Champion, on TransformationTalkRadio.com. To find out more about me and my coaching platform, visit ChampionYourLife.com. That's ChampionYourLife.com. You have one precious life. Let's live it to your fullest potential. Let's go. Let's do this together. See you next time.